Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this program on the KL2 Mentored Career Development Award from the Center for Clinical and Translational Science. My name is Stuart Hobbs. I'm the program manager for the KL2 Award program. And I work with the KL2 Co-Directors, Cynthia Carnes, professor in the College of Pharmacy, as the director of the KL2 program. Ably assisted by Mark Weavers, a professor in the College of Medicine. I just wanted to give you their contact information in case you also, as you're preparing your application, might wish to reach out to them. I'll be sharing these slides with you at the conclusion of the program. I also have a packet that has some sample text that successful applicants have used in the past that could also guide you in your application process. So for today's program, just wanted to talk briefly about the Center for Clinical and Translational Science, and then get into the KL2 grant, talk about it, kind of some definitions around clinical and translational science to explain the kind of research that this award funds, talk about the eligibility criteria, some of the benefits of the KL2, and then walk through the key components of the application as outlined in the RFA, and then conclude with discussion of the study section, how the applications will be evaluated, and there should be time for questions and answers. But feel free to put any questions you have as we go along in the chat box, and I'll be stopping periodically to ask if you have any questions. You want to unmute yourselves and ask a question at that time. You can do that as well. So, who are we? Well, the Center for Clinical and Translational Science is one of about 60 such centers across the United States that are funded by the Clinical and Translational Science Award Program, which is sponsored by one of the newest centers at the NIH, the National Center for Advancing Translational Science, or NCATS as we call it. So there are clinical and translational research centers such as ours at just about all the major academic medical centers across the country, as you can see from the, the map there. And NCATS was established some 10 or 12 years ago to solve this problem that one science journalist identified as the valley of death, this space between observations made in the clinic or the lab by physicians and researchers, and then the patients who might benefit from these possible treatment observations. And there turns out is a heavy toll to cross that bridge, and it can take a very long period of time as well. And so NIH established NCATS to be focused on shortening that time period and lessening the costs for these developments. So the focus of NCATS is on translation, that multi-step process of turning observations in the lab, clinic, or the community into various kinds of interventions as listed below that can improve people's lives. NCATS does this through a variety of things. But a key one, of course, is the award program that funds the CCTS and these other centers. They also have other more targeted grants. They've got an intramural research program, programs around rare diseases, a variety of other activities. I would like to take this time to, if you have not, to become a member of the CCTS. Actually, you're required to be a member to apply for the KL2, and it's very easy to do. Just go to our website, click on the Become a Member link, and you just have to provide your name and email. I think, and then you can choose which kind of newsletter option you'd like to have. So it's very simple, and gives you regular information about a variety of offerings, programs that our office puts on, as well as grants opportunities and information from the NIH and other sources that is relevant to clinical and translational science. And of course, we provide a great deal of services that help researchers, from participant recruitment and retention services to various biomedical informatics and others that you can find out about at our website. So the KL2 Award in particular, it is an institutional NIH Career Development Award funded by NCATS. So those who are familiar with K Award, you know that most of them are individual awards that you apply directly to the NIH for. There is the KL2 program, which is institutional K Award, and John Bird in the Cancer Center is the director of PI for a longstanding K-12 award at OSU. Yeah, KL2 is the institutional K Award that NCATS funds. And so it's specifically for investigators who have made a commitment to conduct patient-oriented or translational research. It's targeted to assistant professors on the tenure track or clinical track who are basically 3 years or less into their appointment. And the goal is to prepare you for a successful career as a clinical and translational researcher. I wanted just to give some definitions here from the NIH, just to remind you that clinical research is one of three things. It's either patient-oriented research, that's research conducted with human subjects or on material of human origin. And it can include mechanisms of human disease or therapeutic interventions, clinical trials, development of new technologies. However, clinical research can also be epidemiological or behavioral studies, and also outcomes research and health services research all fall under the category of clinical research. And so those are all activities that would be funded by this award, which also funds translational research, which is, again, that process of turning observations into the lab into interventions that can improve human health. And so for these kind of more strictly translational projects, they might be more animal studies, or even maybe a little further beyond the more basic kind of studies that have a clear implication for translation into interventions to impact human health. Translational research follows a spectrum from T1 to T4 that you can see here. Again, it outlines some of the things that can be funded by the KL2 Career Development Award. So any questions on any of these definitional issues? Let's move forward. I did want to mention briefly that the CCTS sponsors a couple of mentored career development awards for junior faculty. Obviously, you're interested in the KL2. There's a program tomorrow on the Davis Brimmer Award. This is a Path to K Award, which uses funds from the College of Medicine. So you're required to have an MD in order to apply for this particular award. And I think that the biggest distinction here is that the Davis Brimmer is a pre-K award. So it's for people who picture themselves as planning to write, say, in 2 or 3 years, a K award, an individual K award. KL2 is for people who want to then be collecting data and getting some training that will enable them over the next couple of years to apply for an R award. So kind of think about where you are in your research career and the kind of research you've done, the kind of preliminary data that you have and training you have, determine which one of those might be best for you. Well, again, for the Davis Brimmer, you need to have an MD degree. I see we have a question in the chat. How do you best determine if you're pre-K versus pre-R1? I guess, again, it would be thinking about, you might want to talk with your mentors and other advisors. It's a reflection of the kind of data that you've accumulated from your ongoing research. Also, your skill development. Are you developed enough skills as an independent researcher in order to then be a viable candidate for an R1 award? For example, if you are a PhD, perhaps you've had an extensive training in research and might be, or you have a research PhD, you might be more ready for an R award if your primary training is as in a medical degree or nursing or pharmacy or some other more clinical oriented degree. You may need more training in terms of research. So those are the sort of issues you want to think about. And it's very specific to the individual. So you'll need to really talk to the your mentors and other advisors to know. As I said, this is for junior faculty on the tenure track or clinical track, some 3 years or less into their current appointment. You must have a research or health professional doctoral degree or its equivalent, and these listed here. Per NIH rules, you need to be a U.S. citizen or non-citizen national, or have be a permanent resident in the United States. And here's a question also, if you could apply for the Davis-Brimmer with the intention of applying for the KL2 in a short time. And that actually is possible. We've had a couple of people who transitioned from the Davis-Brimmer to the KL2 Award. So it kind of depends on your particular circumstances. It depends on the kind of K award you might want to be applying for, which institute you might be applying for. So there's some various considerations there to take into account, but that's definitely one possibility. Now, this is a early stage investigator career development award. So if you've been a principal investigator in the past on some major research grants from the NIH, had an R1, for example, you would not be eligible for this award. Or if you've had a former or current PI on a major industry or foundation or other government peer-reviewed research or career development grant that has over $100,000 in direct costs per year, you would not be eligible for this award. And some other major grants that would eliminate affect your eligibility. Also, you cannot, per NIH rules, have simultaneous K award applications, K awards that duplicate each other. So you can't apply for the KL2 and then a KO8 with the same application. So if you have some very, very different project with very, very different mentors and very, very different career development plan, you could have 2 different K awards. That would not seem to apply to most people who would be that kind of divergent in their research interests and career development interests. They would be able to accomplish that. So you have to do these things sequentially, and that applies for other K awards. You can, for KO7 or K22 or K23, you have to apply for them sequentially, not all at the same time. The benefits of the KL2 parallel those of the K awards in that it gives you 75% release time for research. We do have, for our grant awards, a salary cap. So they'll pay 75% of your salary, 75% of $120,000 or less. We provide 3 years of funding. The first 2 years come from the CCTS funds, and then the final third year at 50% release time is provided by your college and or department and or division, kind of depending on where you're coming from. You do get, for those 3 years, research expense support up to $25,000 per year from the CCTS, which you can use then to pay for supplies and equipment, used to apply to salaries of technical personnel, use it to travel to research meetings and workshops, purchase statistical services, pay for the training costs. We also have a training curriculum associated with the KL2. There's a monthly K Lunch and Learn that covers a variety of scientific and career development topics. And it's just now been changed to the 4th Tuesday of the month. The Business of Science is a 3-day training program that we offer every other year about leadership and project management in science. It gives you some of these skills that we find that researchers need. They're not taught in graduate school about managing projects and people to advance your research. The Association for Clinical and Translational Science has an annual meeting, typically in April in Washington, D.C., where you can present your research, and there are a variety of other programs that are relevant to K scholars that can benefit you in your research and career development. We offer some other trainings, some communication trainings, there's innovation entrepreneurship training, and also your individual career development and mentorship plan that you have described that provides you then with additional training that you need. We also have the Launch to Success grant writing course. In the 2nd year, it's a structured interactive workshop where you write an R award, so that by the end of it runs from January to early May, and by the end of it you have an R award that you can submit in June, ideally. Sometimes it waits till October. It concludes, or there's ongoing feedback with faculty and also with your peers in the group, and concludes with a mock study section, which you're able to witness the review of your grant by a group of researchers who have experience on serving on NIH study sections. I should mention too that we're in the process of developing a similar kind of workshop for the writing of K awards, so that we can have program one for people writing R awards and another for writing K awards, because they're very different kinds of beasts, and so separate training experiences are valuable. So another reason to become a member of the CCTS that you can hear announcements about when that program is launched. Yeah, and there's a question in the chat about that. The dual submissions, that's right. It goes both ways. You can't have submit a K23 in October and then submit a KL2 in December. As long as the K23 is still pending, you can't do the KL2, and vice versa, or any kind of K award. You can't have two that have duplicate content pending at the same time. So let's talk about the RFA and the process of applying for the KL2 Award. So first of all, we do ask for a letter of intent, which is due on October 5th, 2020. And that's typically early October is when it's usually due. This takes the form of a REDCap survey. We ask for your project title and a short abstract, and then there's an eligibility checklist. And this content reflects what the purpose of the letter of intent is. The primary purpose is to help us organize the study section. So we want to know who's applying and what research areas they are, so that we can start to organize that review committee, which I'll talk about at the end of this presentation so you can understand the importance of this. We also, as I've gone through, there's some somewhat complex rules here, and so have you go through the eligibility checklist to make sure that you are eligible. And it does ask then also for, we also then will confirm support for your nomination from your department chair. This is kind of especially true if there's a whole bunch of nominations coming in from the same division or department. We kind of like to want to make sure that the department or division chair is aware of that, because they may not be able to support, if everybody gets an award, there might be some issues there. But the primary purpose of this LOI really is to make sure you're eligible, and also that we can get started on working on the study section. Here is what the letter of intent looks like. This has just a survey in red cap and relatively straightforward and small number of questions. Well, let's see, we've got some questions coming in the chat here, so let's see what we have here. So there's a question about the form and the categories of assistant professor versus assistant professor clinical. Typically that clinical are MD faculty, but if you're on the, whatever this person says they're on the tenure track and not the clinical track, so you would choose assistant professor in that case. Now, the full application is due on December 21st. Again, a red cap survey is used, and you answer some questions there and then attach a PDF document with various other components. The red cap survey will have questions about your name, your mentoring team, some demographic questions. Then there's a PDF document that has, for example, the project description, which will have your personal statement and your career development plan and your research plan, and then also bio sketches, letters of support, and a signature page. So the personal statement, that's one page. This is a chance to talk about who you are, why you've chosen a research career, some outline of your previous research experience, and especially how you believe this KL2 grant will change the trajectory of your career or enhance your movement towards your goals. Why are you applying for this particular mentored career development grant as opposed to another one? And why you're applying, what is the kind of training that you need? What are the extra mentoring that you need? How will this, really put you on the path into becoming an independent researcher? Then there is the project description, which is a 10-page maximum, and there's up to 2 pages for your career development plan. Because it's important to note that this is a mentored career development grant. So talk about your 5-year goals, talk about the gaps in your training that this program will help fill, how you'll fill those gaps, be as specific as possible about what kind of training, whether it's the workshops from professional organizations, some training in the lab offered by one of your mentors, specific coursework that you might want to be taking. For example, one of our past applicants for the KL2 Award was an optometrist who had basically done animal research, and he was interested in then switching to do human-focused research. And so he applied for the KL2 in order to get some training in working with human subjects, and then they begin to do that human subjects research. Another one of our successful applicants a few years back was doing a project that involved partnering with immunologists and a lot of immunologically based research, which she was not trained in. And so part of her training plan was to take a few courses in immunology, not so that she'd become a full-fledged immunologist, but that she'd have enough understanding of the field to be able to talk intelligently, particularly ask intelligent questions of her immunological partners. So those are examples of the kind of gaps that researchers see in their training that they need to fill in order to continue to pursue the particular research goals that they have. Note that the NIH has requirements for researchers at different stages of their career for training in responsible conduct of research. And so your training plan should address how you will fulfill those training requirements while you're on the KL2. And the application has the appendices has a list of various courses and other kind of training opportunities that you can pursue to fulfill that requirement. Then there is the research plan, 7 pages, which have your specific aims, talk about the significance of your research, innovation of your research, talk about how you're going to conduct that research, where you should include a list of milestones or benchmarks that will show us how you're going to measure your success in getting through the research project. In the course of this, you can include then various preliminary data that you might have, and the references are not included in the page count. The study section generally prefers specific aims that are phrased in the form of hypotheses, so I would keep that in mind while you are writing that specific aims section. Here's an example of dividing up the specific aims into a chart of milestones. So you can see the aims and some various components then of those, each aim, and then the calendar going across the top there and marking out how that will all proceed. So this makes it very clear how your study section, for the study section, how your research will fit into this 3-year timeline for the award. And you can do a similar kind of chart for your training plan as well. I think the information sample packet that I'll distribute to you has examples of using charts like this to outline your training plan. So any questions about the these components so far of the award application? Well, this is a mentored career development grant, so you need to have a mentoring team. This includes a lead mentor, who's kind of the primary person to be guiding the design and execution of the project, giving you career development, counseling. But then you also will have 2 additional mentors that are complementary to the interests of the lead mentor. And it's desirable that one or more be drawn from another discipline as well. In fact, I guess one will be now, because we've changed to require one of these mentors to be a biostatistician. You can have more than 3 mentors, especially since we've added this biostatistician requirement. Before we just required 3 mentors, so we have, you might indeed have 2 other mentors you have in mind besides your lead mentor. So I think we're starting to see a little bit more plans with 4 mentors on there. We've had people apply with as many as, I think, 6, maybe up to 8 mentors. Study sections kind of start scratching their head when we've got a list that's that big, wondering, why are all these people here? So we don't really have a specific limit on the number of mentors that are available. Keep it to a reasonable amount. more is not necessarily better. I think it really starts to kind of subtract from your score over, you know, a certain number. That's a question in the chat. Does the biostatistician need to be a PhD? That's a very interesting question. I think typically people have had biostatisticians with PhDs. I think it probably would, you know, they'll have their biosketch submitted so the study section can, you know, review their qualifications. But if they are skilled in the kind of biostats that's relevant to your research, that's probably the more important question. Other parts of the application, you and each of your mentors need to supply a biosketch. Remember that the biosketch also has a personal statement component. And I would advise you, rather than just copying and pasting from your K application, your personal statement there into your biosketch, use that space there to make some additional comments about yourself and your background and your training that would be relevant to this. So maybe you'll want to talk in your personal statement in the application proper about some of your research training and experience that's really directly related to what you're doing for the K project. But in your personal statement in the biosketch, you can allude to some of that, but also you could add additional information about maybe additional experiences you've had in doing research that are not in this area, maybe the area that you're applying for, but again, show your training experience in conducting research. That's just an example of how to think about using the section in the biosketch as an additional place to provide additional information about yourself and why you're a good candidate for this award. Make sure that your mentors provide a biosketch that is tailored to this award. Sometimes mentors, or maybe the candidates themselves, are supplying rather general biosketches. So make sure that the biosketch does really make reference to the skills and abilities of the mentor that are relevant to this particular project and are relevant to what those mentors will be doing with you on that project. Likewise, from the letters of support from your lead mentor and the other members of your mentorship team, what they talk about should relate to not only the research, but also your training goals for this award, and whatever the particular role of various mentors in the research project or the training, both is, that all should be reflected in their letters. Many researchers suggest that you write the draft letter of support for each of your mentors and then just send it to them. This is a draft, and you can then edit it as you see fit. So that's certainly one strategy to follow, and it certainly helps to make sure that the letters will be specific to your award. It might also be dependent on who your mentors are, you know, how they feel about that kind of approach. There's a question about, can a full professor apply to be a primary mentor for 2 applicants, or will this be a red flag for reviewers? That's an interesting question. I mean, I think it's recognized that good mentors have multiple candidates. People they might be mentoring. So I'm not sure that would necessarily be a red flag. I think sometimes when the lead mentor is like the head of a cancer center, there have been questions about, is he going to have time to be mentoring this person? So that's more, I think, what should be considered. But because our people in the study section generally know who people are, certainly if there are people in senior positions, and that is always a question: is the person that's the lead mentor going to have the bandwidth to mentor you? And that can be answered in part in the mentoring plan that provides information about how often will be mentored, how often your mentoring meetings will take place. And that's very important to be specific about how the mentoring relationship will take place. And in that regard, I might mention too that it is possible to have a mentor who is not from Ohio State or Nationwide Children's. And generally, it's not recommended a lead mentor be in that role, that a lead mentor be someone who is, close at hand, as it were. That said, we have had at least once in the past a successful applicant whose lead mentor was at a completely different institution. And I think that reflected just the research project and the expertise of that lead mentor. But I think in general, I would say your lead mentor should be someone who is local, but your other mentors, they can come from other institutions precisely because they may have particular skill or access to patient population or other particular tools that you need for your research. And the important point there, though, is just to be very specific about how you will be, conducting that mentoring relationship. And of course, the study section is aware of telephones and Zoom and Skype, but you still need to be very specific and outline that we will have a phone meeting, once a month. That we will be meeting in person at the annual meeting of our very distinguished scientific society, of which we're both members. Things like that. Or you'll be traveling to their lab for 2 weeks in the summer to have hands-on training in a particular research technique. Whatever it is, just be very specific about how that's going to take place. Because the study section will be looking to see that there is an ongoing relationship, and if there's a mechanism you thought about it in advance, how that's going to take place, how frequently you're going to meet, etc. The application has a signature page for you to sign, for your mentor to sign, but most particularly we have a signature from your college dean or your department or division chair, whoever is the appropriate person to make these commitments. The commitment is that the person signing this understands that you've applied for this award, and if you get this award, you will have 75% protected time, and that the remainder of your salary that's not covered by this award will be covered by your college, your department, your division, against the person who really has the purse strings, as it were, and also is in control of your schedule. So particularly if you're in the College of Medicine, it's going to be a department or division chair, and if you're in another college, it's probably going to be the dean. But, so that's just, whoever is the one who controls your time and your salary, that's the person who should sign this. And whoever that person is, at whatever level they're a very busy person. So don't wait to the last minute to do this. You should be in touch with them early on in the process that you're doing this, and then set up a time for them to sign the paperwork. And they may or may not want to read your application, but check in with them as you're going through this process to make sure you can get that done. Our funder, NCATS, does require prior approval of all research which is subject to review by IRB or IACUC. And this is even if they've ruled that it's exempt research. If it has to go through the IRB or the IACUC, it has to get prior approval from NCATS before they'll let us fund you. This has been a somewhat cumbersome process. It seems to be getting easier at the NIH end, and we're doing all we can at our end to make it easier. So there are various components in the application about if you're doing human subjects or animal research information that you have to provide. It's the kind of information that will then have to be sent on to NCATS. So our timeline is that the study section reviews these grants over January, and they meet sometime in February to discuss them. Then the recommendations from the study section are sent to the CCTS Executive Committee, who's the body that actually makes the appointment. They meet twice a month, so it's probably looking at sometime in March for them to make that decision. And so By the middle to end of March, ideally, we have let you know that you are, you've been selected for this award, which will then start start date will be June 1st, 2021. So just a couple of months then to get information in for prior approval to NCATS. So we've asked you to compile a lot of that information in this application so that as soon as you've accepted your letter of offer, we can start the process of getting information sent to NCATS so that they can get their approval done before your start date. And that is why we have also a regulatory consult required as part of this application. The consult with the CCTS regulatory person, Rob Ringel. His information's in the RFA, and you should reach out to him right away to set up a meeting with him, and then he can talk with you about your project and what the prior approval requirements may or may not be. And so this is, even if you're not doing human subjects or animal research, please, if you're not going to the IRB or the IAPCUP, reach out to Rob, set up an appointment. It may just be a very brief meeting, and he can then note, the meeting took place and we agreed, yeah, there's no prior approval issues here. But let Rob be the arbiter about really if prior approval is going to be required for this project or not. You can't make that decision. He's the one who knows all their intricate rules and regulations. So that's why you have to have this consult. Just put that in part of your plan. It could be a very brief meeting. It could be a little bit longer, but he can help you then to understand what kind of information you need to provide in your application now and what kind of information might be required later. Also, you have to have IRB or IAPCUP approval at OSU first before we send it on to NCATS. So if you haven't gotten IRB or IAPCUP approval for the research project you're proposing here, you should be working on that protocol. Get that protocol submitted even as you're submitting this award. We ask in the application if you've submitted for IRB or IAPCUP approval, or if it's pending or if it's approved. Ideally, you should at least be pending when you submit this application in December. Even better if you can have it already approved. But at the very least, make sure your goal is that you can say when you submit this application, you are pending before the IRB or the IAPCUP. And there's detailed information on all this in the RFA. Okay, I'm almost done with the formal part of this presentation. The study section. Members are drawn from across the health sciences, and they'll score your application using an NIHK Award critique form. 3 reviewers will read your application. The first reader is always chosen as someone who is very closely related to your field of research, who can really give a thorough review of the science proposed in your research project. So that is why we want this letter of intent in October, so we understand who is applying, and we can start reaching out to scientific experts to make sure we get that first reviewer. Also, the second reader is someone who is close to your science. It may be maybe more in the general area, maybe not quite as close as the first reader, kind of depending on what your area is and how much resources are available at OSU, although we also will reach out to other institutions if we need. Sometimes we've had people whose research is very specialized, and so all the appropriate reviewers at OSU are on your mentoring team, and so we have to go beyond. That doesn't usually happen because we're a big, diverse institution with lots of qualified readers, but it does happen. So that's, again, why we need to know this in advance. The third reader is assigned to particularly focus on the sections about you as a candidate, on your training plan and your mentoring plan. Because you are evaluated on your clinical and translational research plan, on your career development plan, and your mentoring plan. Basically, these are the 3 legs of the application, and they're the 3 equal components of the review. So this is not an R01. It's not all on your research that you will be scored and evaluated. The career development plan and the mentoring team are all equally important in this. And it invariably happens in a study section. There's a project that's presented, and the reviewers say something along the lines of either the project seems too big to do in the time allotted, or the organization of this is very poor. It's or these areas are very underdeveloped, or a lot of typos and errors in this thing. And immediately they start talking not about you, the applicant who submitted this, let's say poor award, but the mentors. Where were the mentors in reading this? I mean, it sounds like, in fact, the mentors did not see this application before it went in, which suggests there's not really active ongoing mentoring taking place. So that's an example how the study section really sees all of these things as integrated, and look for really how the research, the training plan, the mentoring, how they all fit together toward a common goal. So I've covered a great deal of material here, but you may still have questions, which you can reach out to me via email or phone, and we can talk about those. And in addition, we have a few more minutes here that I can answer questions that you have. So you can unmute yourselves and just jump forth with questions, or you can continue to add questions into the chat. But what questions do you have? What have I missed? What have I confused you, etc.? One thing I think I did not mention was that we anticipate funding 2 persons for this award, this grant season. Can you submit an R1 while funded by the KL2? Yes, you can do so. And indeed, we are encouraging you, at the very least. Our plan is you will in fact submit one at the end of your 2nd year, beginning of your 3rd year. That is the goal. Because we are definitely, our goal here is to provide you a training opportunity that will launch you onto an independent research career. Does the receipt of another R grant terminate the KL2 award? Most likely, yes. It might depend on the size of the award, but in general, yeah, usually that is the case. That when you've got an R award, that you would then transition to that award and leave the K. But there can sometimes be sort of a transition period. A lot will depend on the specifics of the case. But remember, of course, this award is requiring 75% of your time. So anything that eats into that then would require modifications. Other questions? Again, you can unmute and ask your questions.
Quick question.
Yes.
You mentioned that it's typically 2 people that get funded.
And so we have that. So that's why it's the 2 that can be funded. And I would say typically we've gotten from 18 to 25 applications for this award. So that's kind of the pool from which you will be selected from. Any other questions? I see there was a question about, does the biostatistician need to be research faculty, or could a staff biostatistician work? And that's a good point. Actually, yes, a staff biostatistician is certainly acceptable. And indeed, other members of your mentoring team, there might be someone there who maybe is not research faculty because they have a particular skill in a particular research or technique or equipment or something like that, so that such a person might be on your mentoring team. Now, your lead mentor obviously is going to need to be, typically should be a well-funded independent investigator, the research faculty, probably a full professor. But the other people in the mentoring team, that can be different. Again, it's why is this person here? What is it that they're bringing? What is the skills, knowledge, the resources that they bring to the project, to the research project, and to the project of your career development. Other questions? I see there's a question, can the primary mentor be the applicant's dissertation chair or F31 sponsor? That's a good question. It's good because we want to see you moving toward independence. And so if you're continuing, you're moving into a faculty position, but you're continuing to be reliant on the dissertation advisor, maybe a fellowship advisor, yeah, there might, this has certainly come up in study sections. I can't say I quite remember how the results might have come out, but it definitely is a question about wanting you to move on to be more independent by having someone who's different. So I think that's a kind of a delicate issue. All these things are very contextual. So I think in general terms that probably, that might probably be better to have a different person than, let's say, your F award or your dissertation chair. But again, it could very well depend on what your research area is, what your career development plan is, and what that particular person is bringing to it. And if they're the expert in this particular field in the world, then it might make sense for you to be continuing to work with them if you're in that area. Again, that can be very contextual. Any other questions?
Hello, thank you for a great presentation. I had a quick question as well.
Yes.
My question was, I may have missed this in the early part of your presentation about the eligibility, but if you are a fellow in a department, is it by the time the funding would go through for the project to start would be in the summer? So if you would be staying on as faculty, would you still be eligible as a final year fellow to submit the letter of intent in the application this fall?
Yes, you would be. But you would need to make sure that you would include, probably in this case, a letter from, say, I guess the department or division chair, whoever's hiring you, that would, say this is a firm commitment. We are definitely going to be hiring this person. They will be on a faculty position when the grant would start.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had was about the requirement for being a U.S. citizen. Would green card holder be considered permanent resident? And
yes, that's right. That's the green card is what the document for permanent resident status. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And we can email you if we have any additional questions.
Yes, and please feel free to email me with other questions, or if you want to talk or set up a meeting, I am available to talk to you and help you answer any questions you have about the application process.
Thank you very much. This was a great presentation.
Oh, good. I'm glad it was helpful. We're almost at the top of the hour, and I'll get one last call for any other questions. And check the chat. Anybody in the chat? No. If you do again have questions, I was sending out this presentation to you with my contact information. You can reach out to me, and So I appreciate your interest in the KL2 Mentored Career Development Grant, and I look forward to seeing all of you to apply for it. So thank you for participating.